Who is the center point of every single musical? When you are watching something on stage, who is there? Who is leading? It's your protagonist. They could be the hero of the story, they could be the villain, but they are your point. They are your entry point into this show. Every single musical has some kind of protagonist, and that does beg the question we were always going to ask. Who is the best protagonist in a West End musical right now? There's so many, how are we going to decide? Oh wait, we can do this. Welcome back to the Versus Bracket. Yes, the series where I take things, I versus things, and I find the thing that I like the most. Will it be the thing that you like the most? Probably not, but that means you can comment in the comments the one that you think is the most protagonist out of the protagonists. I have picked 32 different protagonists from different musicals currently playing in the West End and slightly beyond, and they are going to battle 1v1 to find who is the best protagonist right now in a musical. But if you haven't seen my face before, hi, I'm Ellie, I talk about theatre. I am the most chaotic theatre person on the internet. I do reviews, I do discussions, I do game shows, versus brackets, rankings, and so much more. And if any of that sounds interesting to you, please consider hitting like and subscribe. It really helps me out, helps out the channel. But let's dive in to this versus bracket. So, as always, versus brackets, we've got 32 characters. That's the most I can fit onto this bracket. I'm only doing West End musicals in this video. And because of that, I kind of was in a place where I didn't have quite enough, so I have opened it up a little bit beyond that. We also need to discuss what I'm counting as protagonist. I am looking to the character who is the most leading. I'm looking to the character who we are most aligned with in places. Some musicals do have two characters that you could look at very equally as protagonists, and in a couple of cases, just to fill out this list, I have actually included two. There's probably more in here that I could have given two, but I've gone with the ones I've gone with, and I'll argue, and you can moan at me for picking the wrong characters in the comments. So I've shuffled these around, we have a random order, and they're going to battle each other, and we're going to start with our first pairing, which is Charles Chumley from Operation Mincemeat. I could see an argument of Ewan Montague being the protagonist, but I felt like it's more Chumley's story, so it makes more sense to go with Charles Chumley. And hilariously, because of the fact that jukebox musicals exist and bio musicals exist, we just fully have Michael Jackson on here. Yep, we have Michael Jackson. We are going to rank him based exactly on how he is presented in MJ the Musical. I mean, technically, this is a matching of two people who are real, but I guess Charles Chumley is a much more exaggerated version of him. I think a lot of this is going to be just like which one I feel is stronger, which one commands the stage more, which one am I more sympathetic for, who am I rooting for more, and I feel like Mincemeat naturally sets Charles Chumley up in a really strong storyline, because he's a bit of an underdog. He's someone who's not quite seen, he's in a place where he's kind of undervalued, and I think we as people love an underdog story. We do. We love a little bit of that. I like how they present MJ in MJ, like, he's cool, he dances well. There's nice moments where you can kind of dig underneath the idea and the idealized version of Jackson that a lot of people know from just listening to his music. But I don't know, I feel like he's not really the strongest protagonist. It's not really his storyline I'm there for. I'm more there for him performing Smooth Criminal, you know? So I feel like this is a comfortable case where I'd give it to Charles Chumley. Operation Mincemeat through to next round. Next up, we've got two sopranos against each other. We have the first musical on here that does actually have two choices. In Glinda Upland from Wicked, obviously, Elphaba is definitely the protagonist of Wicked, but I think there's a clear and strong case for arguing that Glinda deserves a spot up there as well. I mean, at the Tony Awards, they were speaking specifically about the musical version, they were both nominated for leading actress, so there's that. And she's up against the protagonist of Phantom of the Opera, who I would say is Christine Daae. I think Christine is kind of more clearly the protagonist than the Phantom. He's the title character, but the story is really about Christine. This is hard because I do quite like both of these characters. I think Christine in Phantom is a really interesting character to follow. The push and pull that she feels, but I do think she is in moments overshadowed by some of the other people in that triangle, well, the two other people in that love triangle, I guess. Because, you know, the Phantom, he's got that gravitas, he's got the status and the power, and he's lighting the stage on fire, which is camp, and, you know, that's what you're there for. And you have Raoul, who is cool as well, but less flashy. So I don't know if she's like got the biggest voice when it comes to different protagonists. But my lord, she can sing. My lord, she can sing. And she sings. She does. She is my angel of music. But here, I think I am leaning more towards Glinda, actually. I rewatched Wicked last weekend. I went to see Wicked, and I went to see Trans Wicked. Brilliant two-show day. Had a blast. It was amazing. Getting to see the new cast in Wicked, and then seeing trans and non-binary performers getting to do the same material. Mwah, chef's kiss. But I really love how Glinda's presented in that musical. You see that real growth in her character. I think she definitely starts as someone who is a lot more antagonistic, but slowly you warm up to her. Slowly she realizes her mistakes, and like there's a real interesting relationship that goes between these two characters and their friendships and their ups and their downs. And yeah, I think when I'm thinking about which protagonist I enjoy more, which protagonist storyline I really follow more and enjoy watching, I do think it's Glinda. Next up, this is the second one who's got two on this list, because I would argue that despite the musical being called Hamilton, Aaron Burr is our protagonist. In a similar way to something like Jesus Christ Superstar, Judas is our protagonist. We're watching the story through his eyes. He may not be the person we're like massively rooting for, but he's our focus, he's our through line, he's the person that we're really following, and he's a lot of the perspective that we're often getting. So yes, Alexander Hamilton is on here, just because I had the additional slot, so we can speak about him, but I do think I would argue that if there is a protagonist of Hamilton, it is Aaron Burr. And he's up against a fairly newcomer to the West End in Hercules. I enjoy a lot of the journey that Hercules goes on through Hercules. It's a real zero to hero story, and I love a bit of that. But I think they do a really good job at grounding him in a lot of places. I love the relationship that he builds up. I don't think it's like the most layered story for a protagonist, but it's definitely good, and you definitely root for a character like Hercules. Aaron Burr, I love a lot, and maybe it's just like a hard pairing, but I really enjoy the way that Hamilton presents Aaron Burr. It could very easily damn him. It could very easily like push him to one side. I think some of the most important moments in Hamilton are actually diving into Aaron Burr's perspective and his feelings. How he always felt left out, how he feels betrayed by Hamilton. You see these in little tiny moments throughout the musical, even like the first meeting with George Washington, where he's really quickly dismissed. You have an exploration in something like The Room Where It Happens, where you really get to dive into that want and that need to be included. I think in this instance, I would give it to Aaron Burr, sir. Next up, from the Book of Mormon, we have Elder Price, and from The Lion King, we have Simba. This is a very fitting pairing. It would be more fitting if it was Elder Cunningham. Oh boy, like Lion King! Alright, I enjoy Elder Price's story in the Book of Mormon. I do actually think it's the sidekick who has the more interesting story. Like, I personally prefer what they do with Cunningham. The forming of that new religion and the way that builds up and the comedy that comes from that is really, really fun. But Price is a really interesting character as well. Someone who has kind of been the golden child, not really succeeding. I like how his flaws are very clear and evident, despite, you know, being the perfect one, being so good, everyone praising him. It's very clear that his motivations don't really massively come from his religion and his drive. They more so come from his want of going to a very specific place, and when he doesn't get his way, he likes to take it out on other people. That's really his character growth and his journey through that musical. So there's definitely very good stuff there. Simba is someone who, you know, I'm not overly the biggest Lion King fan, but I think Simba's journey has to be very much appreciated. Obviously, he starts the musical as a kid. You see his journey and his guidance from his father. Then the father goes kapui, and then you deal with older Simba coming back, challenging Scar, and all of that. So, like, there is definitely a clear journey. I do definitely like the journey that he goes on, but maybe it's not like the most focus on for like a different protagonist. I think that's like the only pain point that I could maybe provide for picking one over the other. But I do really like the shifting worldview that he has, the different people that he meets. But sometimes I feel like it's maybe more the people around him who are more interesting. Am I talking myself around to Elder Price? I honestly, when I first picked this up, I didn't think I'd be giving it to Elder Price. I mean, honestly, I haven't seen either of these musicals in a while, so maybe I'd rewatch both of them and go, oh no, it's definitely the other one. But personally, when I'm thinking about character journeys and when I'm thinking about different dynamics and everything, I would probably say it's Elder Price for me. Which is nice. It's not normally Book of Mormon that gets very far in these brackets, so yeah, let's go. Next up, we have Miss Eva Peron and Andy Sachs. One from Evita, one from The Devil Wears Prada. Two very, very different musicals. One political musical drama, and one very commercial film adaptation. Um, okay, now obviously these are two musicals where there is alternative characters I could have given it to. Miranda Priestley is definitely platformed in the musical a lot more as the protagonist, but it's Andy's story, come on. And with Evita, I think while the musical does center around Evita, it is Shay who's kind of taking us through that in a similar, like Angela Webber's other work, Jesus Christ Superstar. There's many Jesus Christ Superstar comparisons being made today, despite Jesus Christ Superstar not appearing once on this list. And if you want it on this list, well, I guess you got to bring it back to the West End then. Okay. Any producers watching, you can do that. This is hard because, like, I'm not the biggest fan of the Devil Wears Prada musical, but I actually think Andy's journey is something they do quite well. That kind of sink or swim story that she gets, her rising up and then flying a little bit too close to the sun. I think that's a very natural and interesting story. I think they do good things with it. I think Andy as a character is someone who's nice to follow, a very humble figure, especially in this very over the top workforce. That kind of fish out of water that makes her quite fun to follow in a lot of different ways. Eva Peron is someone who is presented in many different ways in Evita because we're getting two vastly different approaches. She's adored, she's beloved, she is this figure who gives comfort to the people of Argentina, but then there's also a lot to criticize with her politics, with her husband's politics, with the way the musical presents her rise to power. So there's a lot in there that's quite up in the air. It's hard because she's definitely the protagonist of Evita. She is that central focus, and I think despite Shay having maybe more of a voice, I feel like she still kind of dominates that, and she still kind of feels like the clearest voice in that musical. Am I really speaking myself around to giving it to Devil Wears Prada over Evita? I did not think there was a universe where this was happening. I really love Evita as well. Like, Evita's one of my favorite Angelo Beba musicals, and yet I might be giving it to Devil Wears Prada. That's not even like the best protagonist story in the world. I do really enjoy the black and white nature of Evita, but I just, when I'm thinking about protagonists and when I'm thinking about someone who's leading a musical, it does make it interesting, but I think it can be a little bit jarring. Maybe that's why I'm not, like, my gut isn't telling me to give it to Ava Peron. My gut's saying Andy. And maybe this is going to be the most controversial opinion in the world. Maybe y'all are going to yell at me in the comments, and honestly, I would join you if this was anyone else, but I'm gonna give this to Devil Wears Prada. Why am I doing this? This feels like a mistake, but I've clicked the button now, and now I have to move on. Next up, we have Matilda Wormwood versus Jean Valjean. Two musicals, two very clear protagonists. Like, that cut and dry. There's not really anyone else you can really argue for. I guess you could say maybe Miss Honey for Matilda, but, like, come on. It's Matilda's story. This is such a rude pairing. This is such a rude pairing, because I really do love both. Matilda is such a strong character. wise beyond her years, you know, and someone who's very lovely to follow, someone with that kind of childhood innocence, but still all of those smarts behind her. I love those little reminders in Matilda of her actual age and how young she is, despite, you know, how old she does act in certain places and how much she does actually know. And she's got a very clear moral standpoint. She knows what she stands for, and she knows what she's ready to stand against. She's clever, she's fun, she's interesting to follow. There's very clear character challenges for her. I think she is an A-star protagonist. But then again, so is Jean Valjean. Someone who is striving to do good in anything that they are challenged with. Someone who is ready to break the law if they know it's the right thing to do. Someone who revalues their life, readjusts themselves to become a better person. Everything Jean Valjean does in that musical is for other people. He steals a loaf of bread for his sister's child. He becomes the mayor of the city and tries to help people, and when he fails and when his decisions lead to injustice, he is the first person to correct and to help in whatever way he can. This is rude. This is a finale pairing in the first round, and honestly, I could give it to either one of them. Like, I would be happy with either one going through, and I think this is a decision that would change on any other day. But personally, if I'm thinking about who I want to see into next round and who I'm kind of rooting for, I am actually going to say Matilda here. It's literally just a roll of the dice and a random choice, because I do think these two are extremely well paired and well balanced between them, but I'll give it to Matilda because I have to make a decision. Because this came in the first round and was rude, and I've just got to move on. Next up, we have Alexander Hamilton from the musical Hamilton. No points for guessing that. And we have Orpheus from Hadestown. Oh. Oh, okay. Okay. Okay, 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 okay. Okay, I've got this. Now, I love Alexander Hamilton. The ups and the downs. The moments where you're like, Jesus Christ, man, really? And the moments where you're like, oh yeah, he's a smart little lad who's doing smart little lad things. Has anyone in the history of the world ever called Hamilton a smart little lad before? I don't know. I would like to know if I am the first, but I'm not taking it back. He's a smart little lad, isn't he? But then there's also the argument, you know, Aaron Burr is our protagonist. He's the one that we're watching the story through. But I do think it presents Hamilton in many interesting ways, criticizing him where it needs to be criticized, you know, his poor wife, but also showing you the ups and those downs and the moments where he's striving to help. And yeah, I like Hamilton, but this is Orpheus's win. Are you kidding me? This is Orpheus's win. Orpheus exists massively as a parallel to Hades. And I think from the moment the musical starts, you are really drawn in to Orpheus. You get to understand who he is, the flaws that he has, especially in the moments where he's focused on writing the song and not realizing about the world around him. But when he realizes, when he snaps out of it, he is the first person to just strive and go and save Eurydice. But he's flawed in so many ways, he lets the doubt come in. And I think a moment like the end of Hadestown, and I won't go off onto the ending of Hadestown in case you haven't seen it, but that moment only works if you deeply and massively care about these characters. And I think the fact that that moment gets a gasp every single time you watch it, I think that is why Orpheus is a very strong protagonist. I would give this one personally to Orpheus. Next up, last one for this side of the bracket, and then we'll continue into round one. We have Donna Sheridan from Mamma Mia, and we have Titanic. Now, I could have seen many different arguments for who the protagonist is in Titanic. I mean, you could say it's Jack, you could say it's Rose, but it's Celine Dion. It's Celine Dion. But we're not speaking about the real Celine Dion, we're speaking about the parody version from Titanic. I mean, to be fair, you could also argue that Mamma Mia is technically Sophie's story, so Sophie's the protagonist, but I think Donna kind of takes a lot of the meat of the bones of that story. Despite it being Sophie's wedding, despite it being her big day, I think it's still, because of the fact that the dads are coming back, so focused on Donna, her relationship to Sophie, her relationship with these three men that she hasn't seen in like 18 years. How many years? Like 20? How old is Sophie? How old is Sophie again? Tell me how old Sophie is in the comments down below, because I've forgotten. I forgot. But in 20 or so years, she hasn't seen these men, and suddenly they're back in her life. And I think that does center a lot of the narrative around her. That, you know, I could make an argument for Sophie as well, but I felt like it's more Donna's story, weirdly. And I mean, she gets the song. She gets the big moment. The winner takes it all. Hell yeah. As much as I love Celine Dion, I do think this is a slam dunk for Sheridan, but let's talk about Celine Dion. It's just so funny. It's so funny. It's one of our most charming protagonists, because the second that she unveils herself, when she unveils and unsheaths, and it's Celine Dion, the way that, like, it's just electric, and, like, she does not let a single second go by when she is on that stage to let the focus go off her. She is giving it to you every single second in Titanic. She's pulling faces, she's laughing along, she's pointing and jabbing, she's giving little Celine Dionisms. Like, it is camp. But, you know, she's more of a narrator, she's more of someone who's on the outside, so I do think that's harder to root for her as a protagonist. If we're speaking about, like, performances, if we were putting, like, the performance up here of someone like Lauren Drew, and, like, commitment, if this was a commitment challenge, my lord, Celine Dion would be going straight through to the final. But I think when we're speaking more about protagonists, it's definitely Donna Sheridan's story that comes out on top here. The struggle she feels to let these people back in, the ups and downs in her relationship with her daughter, trying to do the best. There's so much there that makes her a really interesting, relatable character. I would give this one personally to Donna Sheridan. Other side. Now, technically one of these musicals is not yet open in the West End, but it's a revival. I know the musical. It's opening in, like, what, 3 weeks? I think it's fair game. Like, I'm not going to make this video again in 3 weeks just to include this one character, so hey. And on the other side, we've got another jukebox musical, so we got another real person. We have Max Bialystock from The Producers versus Bob Geldof from Just for One Day, the Live Aid musical. You could also argue Leo Bloom, but I think a lot of that story centers more around Bialystock. Okay, I'll tell you where I'm leaning right now. I am personally leaning more towards Max Bialystock. I don't think Just One Day has, like, the greatest story in the world. I think a lot of that story actually does revolve more interestingly around some of the side characters, like the mother and the daughter relationship that it's on. Like, Geldof is a nice figure. He's very combative. He's very unafraid to speak his mind, and I do think that makes him quite a fun character to follow, cutting through a lot of the bullshit, basically. But yeah, I don't know. I think a lot of the time I'm thinking about, like, the character journeys and the growth, and I think in the Live Aid musical, the Live Aid of it all kind of takes over Geldof as a character. If you kind of get what I mean by that. The journey is more for the show and the achievements than it is Geldof as a character, which I think is something that sets back a lot of these biomusicals that are set over, like, a very small period of time. There's one on here we haven't spoken about yet that I do think gives you a very good overview of the artist's whole life, that I think she may have a shot. And I think you can kind of narrow down from jukebox musicals we've spoken about and which ones we haven't, who that may be. I don't know who they're paired up with yet. That may change things, but I think that she's got a better shot. So let's instead talk about Max Bialystock. He is... he's a great character. I love Max Bialystock. And I think it's so fun to follow his journey and his energy while he's setting up this plan, and it's so fun to watch it blow up in his face. The reactions he has, the journey that he goes on, and the realization of the friendship that he has there in Bloom, while that goes up and down, that's really fun to watch. I would personally give this to Max Bialystock. Next up we have Cher, specifically, I think it's Cher Horowitz, isn't it? I've written surnames for everyone else, but I haven't put one for Cher. It's Cher Horowitz, right? But we're speaking specifically about Clueless. And on the other side, we have the poet from Choir of Man. Choir of Man is kind of at a disadvantage here a little bit, because the characters in Choir of Man are more templates. There's not really a massive journey for them, but it's like little snapshots into characters' lives. And I do think the poet in Choir of Man has a lot of moments where they do that quite successfully. The moments where they're celebrating the environment they're in, that pub, the people around them, the little moments of connection between the other members of the bar, these are the moments where you really feel his presence and his importance in that space, and the through line that the little bits of poetry in Choir of Man delivers. And there's also moments where it becomes a lot more meta, and we see a glimpse into the actors' lives and who they are and where they've come from and their relationship to acting and these spaces and masculinity and everything around it. I think there's a lot of really interesting discussions that Choir of Man has through their story, even though it's not like a clear beginning, middle, and end, that I do think makes the poet an interesting protagonist. On the other hand, I do really like Cher as well. Cher is a person who has a very specific worldview. They are someone who is quite caring and compassionate, but a lot of their actions are maybe ill-informed or a little bit naive. I think Clueless struggles on stage specifically from a lack of a clear, structured narrative. That was some of my criticisms with Clueless as a show, whereas a film can kind of get away with that sometimes. But there's definitely things in there that do align you with her massively. And I think despite opinions around her, it is clear to an audience that while these might not be the best choices to make, she is making them for good reasons, and she does have good intentions. Who is stronger? I went into this thinking it would be Cher, but actually, I'm going to give this one to the poet. That might be a little bit of a controversial opinion, but I do really like the little glimpses that Choir of Man gives into that character. I think it's a very different way to set up a protagonist. I think it's not like the clearest protagonist on here. I don't think the poet's going to get like much further into the bracket, but I'd like to celebrate what they do and a different approach to being a protagonist here. Next up, we have Back to the Future the musical with their protagonist Marty McFly, and we have a newcomer in Burlesque and their protagonist Ali Rose. Have you seen my review of Burlesque? If you have, you may know where instantly I want to lean. I think Ali Rose is a character I really wish I could root for more, but I don't think the story does massive justice to her character. I think her aims and objectives and ambitions are a little bit cloudy and muddy, and they change every 5 seconds and go between like these ideas that exist from the original film and these ideas that haven't been invented more for the stage show. I think it muddies it, and because of that, I think it muddies her status as a protagonist as well. It's really sad because she is a very sweet character, and I think a lot of that comes from the portrayal on stage. Jess Foley does an incredible job at portraying that character, but I want some more journeys, I want some more growth, I want some more challenges to be thrown her way, because that's where a protagonist can grow and learn, and you can dive more into who they are. I think it's very obvious the way I'm leaning here is going to be more towards Marty McFly. Marty McFly isn't like my favourite protagonist ever, but there's a very clear energy that he has. I think he has a great dynamic with Doc Brown. I think I value those two together more than I just value Marty on his own. But he's got a very clear voice, he's got a very clear stance. I think the fish out of water story that he kind of gets by being shoved into this different time period is really interesting to see how he adjusts. I would personally give this one to Marty McFly. I honestly want to like Ali Rose more, but I think Marty McFly is stronger here. Next up, we have Christian from Moulin Rouge, another character who I actually don't know the surname of Christian. Christian definitely has a surname, doesn't he? Surely he does. And up against Christian, whatever his surname is Elphaba Throp. Oh boy, I love Elphaba. I love Elphaba's journey and her story, and it's something I've appreciated more and more as I've grown up and I'm rewatching it now and really getting more into the political edge of Elphaba's story. The prejudice that she faces and the real world comparisons we can draw to that with people of colour through the animal storyline and how closely aligned she feels with that. I think there's a lot of parallels to different movements as well, you know. I think in the real world, the fight for marginalized communities often linked together. If you're fighting for people of color, you should also be fighting for trans people, for queer people, for disabled rights. A lot of these fights go hand in hand. And I really love how something like that is really reflected through Elphaba's storyline with Dr. Dillamond as well. This character who's experienced a lot of injustice, seeing it happen to other people and standing up for them. That clear character stance and that empathy is so vital to understanding exactly who Elphaba is and why she does what she does. And she is a really strong protagonist who I really, really enjoy watching. Christian, he's okay. I think you need a really good performer to sell Christian. Because he's not the most interesting guy in the world, is he? You know, he's just kind of in love with a girl, and I don't know, he's a bit wet. I'm not gonna lie. Now, granted, I'll give him this. He's dedicated. And I think the more and more he's challenged, the more and more things are taken away for him. I think it is interesting to see how he deals with that. The fall he takes and how much it takes to get him out of that hole. But I do think it's quite a big jump in the musical that maybe could be explored more, but isn't, like, bad. It's a nice, interesting storyline, if a little bit underbaked, but I think from my discussion on this, you can clearly see where I'm leaning to. I'm Elphaba Frop all the way. Love Christian. Love a good performer as Christian. Did you see Jim Moscato? He had a little bit of growl to his Christian, especially when he was going through, like, the turmoil when he's doing Roxanne. Oh, that's what I like to see. Next up now, I'm going to say the character I've put on here for Cabaret is not the character I would have initially given it to. But the first versus bracket I ever did, the protagonist, I would say, from Cabaret is the character who won that bracket. So I didn't really want to put her on here again. So instead, I've gone for the character who I think is the second, who is kind of the other focus of Cabaret's narrative. And it's not the MC. If I'm not going to speak about Sally Bowles, I want to speak about Clifford Bradshaw. And up against Cliff, we have Rusty the Steam Train from Starlight Express. Let's go in order. Let's start with Cliff. Now, Cabaret is a musical that I do think is massively centered around Sally Bowles. I think it's a lot about her attitudes to the world around her. It's a big old representation of what happens when you allow these forces to build up, when you kind of close your eyes and plug your ears and go la 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 la. I think it's a very interesting perspective that Cabaret takes, but I also think Clifford is a massive part of that. Someone who is a lot more aware of what's happening. Someone who challenges Sally and recognizes a lot of those dangers. He is kind of the first person and the last person we center around on Cabaret. So I do think there is a good argument to make that he is, in turn, one of the protagonists. There was a world where initially, instead of having both the characters from Hamilton, it was Sally Bowles and Cliff. Cliff is such an integral part of Cabaret and understanding that story, and I really like his representation in the musical. On the other hand, we have Rusty, who, he's a train, and he likes to win the contest. He's going to choo-choo into that station, and he's going to win. His character journey is very simple. It's a children's musical. It's a musical about trains. I'm not looking for the most interesting protagonist. I think what Starlight Express does with Rusty is kind of what you need from Rusty, but when you're comparing him to Clifford Bradshaw from Cabaret, this character who is in this really deeply complex political world, I just really don't think there's much comparison, and I'm sad that this is the pairing that Rusty got. I do think this one goes to Clifford Bradshaw. Next up, now, 6. There is not one queen who takes the crown as the leading queen in 6. So, I have indeed put all 6 queens together, and we're speaking about all of them. Is that cheating? Maybe. Did I leave it on here because I really need to fill up the slots? Absolutely. Up against the 6 queens of 6, which may be an unfair fight, we have a off-West End musical. It is Sing Street, and the character of Connor Lawler. Is this a fair pairing to put 6 characters up against 1? Maybe not, but hey, I did want to speak about 6, and I feel like if I'm speaking about every single other West End musical, it felt weird if there was only one I left off. So, I'm doing it. Screw it. Why not? I think I can get away with this because the character journey for these 6 queens is kind of linked. They all go through this similar journey, and it's kind of more of a journey for the audience, you know, that twist and the rug that they pull out from under you to represent how history has viewed these queens and how society as a whole, as a wider perspective, judges women. I think that's the protagonist journey that they go on, and it's really nice to watch. And I think the way that they go from kind of butting heads to all being a one unit is extremely satisfying. I really like Connor as well. Connor in Sing Street is a lovely little protagonist. He falls head over heels in love with this girl, and it's just this sweet story of him experimenting and him essentially coming of age and realizing his place in the world and being able to have a way to channel his angst and his feelings and his emotions, whether they be anger towards school and authority figures, or if it is simply just how he feels about this girl. These two are quite hard to compare and draw lines to specifically, just because of the different nature of these journeys. But twist my arm and push me on it, I do think the more satisfying protagonist is the group here. I do think I would give it to the 6 queens. We're almost through the first round. Talking about characters makes these videos so long. Next up, we have our final jukebox musical. We have Miss Tina Turner from Tina, the Tina Turner musical, versus Oliver Twist. Now, I did consider Fagin. Fagin, especially in the current West End production, is more centered around as a protagonist. He's the person who gets the final bow. He's the person who gets the final words in the musical. You know, the final image we get in that show is Fagin. I went with Oliver just because I do think more of the narrative centers around him. But I will say I do think Fagin probably has more of the edges of a character and more of an interesting outlook and worldview that would probably push him further than Oliver. But it's just how the cookie crumbled. If any character from a jukebox musical, if any protagonist from a jukebox musical could get further, it's probably Tina Turner. Tina as a musical does a really good job at showing you the whole story, the ups and the downs in Tina's life. She's someone who led a really interesting life with her relationships and her challenges in that. And I think that really gives her an arc that we can follow through that musical. Oliver, he just kind of lets things happen to him a bit, you know? He draws the short straw, except that doesn't happen in this version of the musical, but hey ho, here we go. Then he's kicked out, he goes to the funeral parlour, they do that really terrible song, and then Oliver gets good after that song. Food Glorious Food is great. Boy for Sale is fine. Then you have the weird funeral parlour song, then you get Where Is Love, and that's pretty good. But then it goes back down because we've got to finish the funeral parlour bit, and then the rest of the musical is great, you know? You just have to kind of wait through the weird funeral parlour bit. It's so weirdly outdated, and it's just not really massively funny. You kind of have to work doubly hard to make that and the Bumble and Widow, whatever her name is, song to not just feel weird and out of place. The film had it right. They cut those songs why can't the musical follow suit? Like, come on. Anyway, rant over. I do really like Oliver beyond that. But I don't know if it's Oliver himself that is the reason I really like Oliver. He's sweet, he's lovable, he's charming, but I don't really have any other things to apply to him that really make me massively root for him, beyond the fact he's just a sweet little lad. Like Alexander Hamilton, apparently. 2 little sweet little lads. So yeah, when I'm thinking about the protagonist journey I prefer to follow, it's Tina Turner. If it was Fagin, which I'm kind of regretting not putting him on here now, in this place, I do think Fagin would have won out, but I'm going to give it to Tina Turner. Let's go. And finally, for round 1, we have Jay Gatsby from The Great Gatsby and Benjamin Button from The Curious Case of Benjamin Button. Now, does it upset me that I can't put Nick on here instead? Because Nick is fundamentally the protagonist of The Great Gatsby? Yes, but from watching the musical, Nick's not the protagonist. Nick ain't even the narrator of the musical. He's kind of shoved to one side when he is really the character we need to be watching that musical through. But I'm speaking specifically about the musical, so I have to go with who the musical's protagonist is, who is Gatsby. Like, he's the protagonist of the musical, both in the marketing, both in the actual book as well. It's weird, right? Because I feel like Gatsby as a character just doesn't really work as a protagonist. There's massive flaws in his worldview. There's clear reasons why his fate ends up how it does. And I do think that makes him an interesting character to follow. But I do think you need that challenge. You need that other perspective to watch him. You need that idolization from Nick. That's really the perspective that we should be following here. And just kind of switching it, I don't think does massive favours. But I do think Gatsby is an interesting character to follow. And why his fate ends up how it does, and his downfall in many ways. So there's ups and downs to it. Benjamin Button, one of my favourite musicals, probably the best musical in the West End right now, and it is a crime that it is closing. And if you haven't seen it yet, go and see it before October 11th, please. I'm begging you. Benjamin Button, as you expect, lives his life in reverse, and I think this allows, as a protagonist, for him to have a really interesting journey. There's a lot of ups and downs in the different relationships he has. He starts a lot wiser than he ends up, and the musical plays with the narrative in so many really fun ways to have older Benjamin still reflect onto younger Benjamin, whether that be notes in a bottle or little callbacks to previous moments in relationships. He's such a lovely character to follow, allowing his existence to really deeply affect him and that be his one flaw. And when he finally accepts truly who he is, he can finally settle. That's such a lovely character journey. I would give this to Benjamin Button. So we've finished our first round. Now we're going to go through the rest of the characters a little bit more quickfire now we've spoken about everyone and find our winner. I'm going to have to make snap decisions here, so I may do things I regret, but that's the nature of the job. Charles Chumley, Glinda. I love both of these characters. I really love the ups and downs in Glinda's journey, but when I'm thinking about protagonists and when I'm thinking about leading a story, I think Charles and his underdog story takes it for me personally. Aaron Burr versus Elder Price. I think these are two characters who have amazing, amazing journeys. Flaws within there that make them interesting to follow. But push me and twist my arm in it, I would personally give it to Aaron Burr. I think it builds really well to his final moments and to his final action. I think that's what tips it over the edge for me. Andy versus Matilda. I think this is a really easy choice. While I do like Andy's story, I think it's quite a traditional and like a story that's a little bit more overdone, and we see that type of journey done a lot, whereas Matilda is a main character who I really love to follow. I really love the different dynamic that she brings within that show. I would personally give it to Matilda. While I do love Andy, I do think Matilda is a stronger protagonist in that sense. Orpheus, Donna Sheridan. This is actually harder than I expected it to be because, you know, Hadestown, one of my favourite musicals of all time. But we're not speaking about the musical itself. We're speaking about the character journeys. I love Donna. I love the journey she goes on. My heart is saying Orpheus, but is it because I like Hadestown more? That's what I'm trying to figure out. Because Donna's journey is so vital to that musical as well. I do think, if I'm making a snap decision, Orpheus is the right way to go. But Donna, hats off to her. Other side, Max Bialystock versus the Poet. I think this is a very clear and obvious win for producers. While I do like the things that Choir of Man does, and while I could give it slightly the edge over Cher, I don't think it takes the edge over Max and his very, very funny storyline. Marty McFly, Elphaba, I'm giving it to my green girl. My green girl's going far. I like Marty. I like him as a protagonist. I just think Elphaba's journey is more interesting, and that's the tiny thing I can use to push her over. The Six Queens of Six versus Clifford Bradshaw. Ooh. I think there's more to Cliff's story. And I think this is where the queens being all together is actually hindering them slightly, because there's so much politics to Cliff's story. There's so much it builds into that and the socio-political world of Cabaret. Whereas a lot of the character journey for the Six Queens, you kind of have to wait through every single journey to get to that endpoint. It's a great endpoint, but when push comes to shove, I think I'm going to give this to Mr. Bradshaw, Clifford Bradshaw. Finally, Tina Turner, Benjamin Button. Ooh, okay. I think this is Benjamin Button. I think this is Benjamin Button's to lose. But I do really appreciate what they do with Tina Turner. I think Tina, in that musical, has a very clear story. I think telling her whole life really gives you a wider sense of who she is and how she ended up where she is, the challenges along the way. But I love how Benjamin Button presents that story, doing it in a slightly unconventional way for an unconventional story, but still feeling grounded and realistic and human. I will give it to Benjamin Button. Round 3. Operation Mincemeat's Charles Chumley versus Aaron Burr. While I do love the underdog story of Charles and Charlie, I do think Aaron Burr is probably the stronger here. I think it's just all of those little details. And I think in a comedy, you don't really get to dive extremely underneath the character of Charles. I think you get a little bit of that in Dead in the Water. I think you get moments of it, and it's really nice to see Charles stand up for himself. But I think Hamilton paces these moments like a Wait for It, like a Room Where It Happens, like even his final moments, extremely well, pacing them for the musical, where I feel like his journey is just a tiny bit stronger. So I would give it to Hamilton's Aaron Burr. Matilda, Orpheus. This is a very hard decision. I love Matilda. I really do love Matilda. And her character journey and how they present her, challenges she faces, and the way she gets around that. But I really love Orpheus. I really love the journey that they take Orpheus on. I really love the moments where he's challenged as well, and the moments where he challenges others. The parallels between him and Hades are so strong and so interesting and reflect on the entire musical and the entire story as a whole. I would give it to Hadestown's Orpheus, and I don't know if I'm going to regret that, so I'm just going to move on and leave that in the air and leave that hanging. Moving on. Let's go. Max Bialystock, Elphaba. Max Bialystock, Elphaba. Is it recency biased? I'm going to say maybe Elphaba. I think there's a lot more to Elphaba's story than Bialystock, especially because Elphaba's story relates a lot more to me and how I feel and how I've experienced the world. I do think that's a protagonist that I really do relate to, so I'm going to personally give it to Elphaba. Finally, the battle for the bees. Bradshaw, Button. Oh, are we going to go for the political protagonist, or are we going to go for the Cornish protagonist, I guess? Benjamin Button is such a good character. I love the journey to take him on. I love the growth that he has. I love the ups and the downs in that. But also Cliff has a really engaging story as well. But I think the thing I use here to pick one over the other is I think Cliff's story gets really interesting in Act 2. Whereas Act 1, it feels like he's kind of the second focus. I think him and Sally together are a joint focus, but it's definitely more Sally's story, whereas Benjamin Button definitely feels like the vocal point and the focus of Benjamin Button. Obviously, he's the main character. I think they pace that well through the story. I think I really do feel for Benjamin in these moments. It's hard. It's hard because I love both of these characters. And either way, I'd feel wrong sending one through, but I'm gonna go Benjamin Button. That's my snap decision. I already regret it, but hey, let's move on to our semi-final. Aaron Burr, Orpheus. While I love Orpheus and his journey and the parallels, I personally think that this is Aaron Burr's to win. I think the way that they tell his story, the way it interweaves with Hamilton's there, I think his presence for this musical is extremely strong. And I've got to give it to him. I've got to give it to him. I love Orpheus. I love Hadestown. Hadestown is one of my favourite musicals of all time, but I'm giving it to Aaron Burr. I'm giving it to Aaron Burr, which means Orpheus will be going into our third place battle. And let's see who our other third place battler is and who's going into our final. We have Elphaba and we have Benjamin Button. This is so funny. We're getting musicals I enjoy. I mean, I like Hamilton a lot more than I do Wicked, but like, if you were asking me out of these 4 musicals, my top 2, it's Hadestown and Benjamin Button. Those are like my 2 favourites. So I think it makes sense that these guys have got here. Obviously, last time the musical I liked more didn't go through. So am I keeping that up with Benjamin Button? I think it's hard just because I relate so much to Elphaba's story. I think I love how they lay that out. I think it's less strong in Act 2. And is that the thing I can use? But I do think the way they set it up is very strong. I just think Act 2 of Wicked struggles a little bit with pace. And honestly, that's why I'm really excited with the second movie having a lot more time to actually fully flesh things out. I think if they play their cards right and they use their time effectively, they could do a lot more for Elphaba's story in that second half. Because Benjamin Button's story is beautiful, but it is simple in many ways. But that's kind of the lovely part about it. It's a very human story for a person who is kind of cursed to not have a very human life, to have these constant challenges, and it's very understandable why he struggles and why he can't really face life and he can't really settle down properly because of these voices that have been constantly shutting him down. I think from what I've said, the right decision here is to send through Benjamin, but Elphaba, I do think, deserved the place in that finale, and yeah, I'm gonna go with that. So we have our bracket fully laid out. Before we go to our finale, let's find who is our third place out of Orpheus and Elphaba. If I'm thinking about which decision was harder, if I'm thinking about which decision pushed me more, if I'm thinking about the characters I relate to and why I relate to them, I do think my personal third place here is gonna be Elphaba. I have the few little touches that I'm like, on her story, but I think it's extremely well set up. I think the journey that she takes, I think even the relationships that she has with Glinda are so nice to watch and so satisfying. I think if the second Wicked film does a great job, then maybe Elphaba could get into that finale and take the top spot, but I'm going to give it to Elphaba from this list. So, I thought through, I've made snap decisions. Maybe they weren't the right ones, but we've gone with them anyway, and we've come to our final pairing. Aaron Burr from Hamilton, Benjamin Button from The Curious Case of Benjamin Button. And please let me know in the comments, who is your winner pick? Is it one of these two? Is it someone who didn't even get past first round? My favourite comments on these videos are always the ones that play along and join in, whether that be doing the entire bracket if you're feeling dedicated, or just picking out a couple of fights and a couple of people that you would like to see get a little bit further. I'm making snap decisions here. They may not be the best decisions, and it's all subjective. You can pick whoever you want to pick. But I've got to make my decision now on my winner. Aaron Burr, Benjamin Button, 2 extremely strong characters, but I do think my personal choice is clear here. Right now, in 2025, with the West End laid out how it is, I think my personal favourite protagonist is Aaron Burr. That may be a shock, but I think Aaron Burr's storyline in Hamilton is so interesting to follow. I love a flawed protagonist. I love a protagonist who, is not always making the right decisions, but you can understand them. You can see why they do what they do. You don't always have to root amazingly for a protagonist, but you need to understand who they are and why they do what they do. And I think Hamilton, the musical, does a fantastic job at presenting and representing Aaron Burr. That's not to undersell Benjamin Button, and that is still to say go and see Benjamin Button in the West End before it closes, because oh my god, what a beautiful musical. But that's my choice. Let me know yours in the comments down below. And let me know any other brackets you would like to see me tackle in the future. If you did enjoy this video, please consider hitting like and subscribe. It really helps me out, helps out the channel. Here's some links to some other videos on the screen right now, and the link to my Instagram if you'd like to drop me a follow over there. Also, a huge thank you to our channel members on screen right now, who pledge a little bit a month to support me and what I do here. But that's it for me today, and I hope to see you next time. Bye!